All right, everyone. Welcome to class today. We're going to be learning about governments. Hope you all had a great weekend. Now, I realize a lot of you guys are going to be watching this on Wednesday, but I still hope you had a good weekend. Thank you for all the emails that I'm receiving from you guys, all the questions that you're asking. Continue to ask those questions. I always, again, Monday through Friday, you can email me. Conferences are set up Wednesday and Thursday, but anytime you have a question, ask, because that's what I'm here for. I'm your teacher. So I will help you out with anything that I can. Let's get going today. So governments. Before we learn about governments, you have to ask yourself a question. What is a government? All right, what does that even mean? Well, if you think about the word govern means to have rule or to have authority over, could be anything. Maybe you're the governor of a middle school class. Maybe you're governing an entire state. Maybe you're governing an entire country. But to govern means that there is an authority and there's a rule that you have. And there are certain powers that you possess that affect the people who are under you. But we need to actually know. So that kind of helps us if we know what the word govern is. But let's take a look at what the definition of governments are. It is a system by which a country is ruled. Now, if you're thinking, okay, so what does that mean? Well, I want you to think about it like this. Oh, hold on one second. Sorry, guys. I actually had to sneeze. We had a fire drill, so I ran out into the heat and then came back into the AC, and I don't think you want to see me sneezing on camera. So let's go back to this. So it is a system by which a country is ruled. What does that mean? Well, think about it this way. At your house, your parents have a certain system for how the house is run. So think about it. Maybe you have certain chores that you have to do. There's a certain time you have to go to bed. There are maybe certain traditions you have for celebrating each other's birthdays. All those things are part of the system that your parents have set up. Hey, what you eat for breakfast, what you eat for lunch, what you eat for dinner. Things you're allowed to do, things you're not allowed to do. But how many of you guys have then spent the night at your friend's house, or maybe spent the day at your friend's house, and you notice, oh, hey, wait a second. At my friend's house, their parents allow them to do things that I can't do at my house, or they're not allowed to do things that I'm allowed to do at my house. Well, you're noticing that there are two different systems. There's a system that exists at your house, and that affects what you're allowed to do and what you can and can't do. And then at your friend's house, they have a different system, and that affects what they can and can't do. Well, now we're dealing with a system that affects an entire country. If you think about it, what type of system a country has, what type of government system a country has, is important, because that will affect the freedoms that the people have, or the freedoms that the people don't have. It will affect their ability to operate a business, raise their children, all sorts of things. So it's very important that we understand different government systems and the way that they work. So this YouTube video is part 1, and we're going to be focusing on monarchies. There will be part 2 and a part 3, and I think a part 4 as well. But for right now, part 1 is only on monarchies, and each part that we have for the YouTube video is going to be focused on a different type of government system. That way our video isn't 40 minutes long. So let's take a look at monarchy. So our government system today is monarchy. It is a government that is ruled by a monarch. Let's make sure that we're writing this down. It is a government that is ruled by a monarch. Now, if you're asking yourself, okay, so what is a monarch? Well, let's answer that question in a second. Let's make sure we have this part. Monarchs are chosen to lead by birth. Their power is hereditary. Now, I'm going to get back to hereditary, what a monarch is. We're going back to, hey, how are you doing? We're going back to kind of shaky camera, but I think this is going to be important. So let's take a look here. So here is a picture of a monarch. So monarchs, I should say, plural. So notice, oh, hey, they're a king or queen. Well, that is a monarch. So think about it. We don't say, oh, hey, you're a monarch. Monarchs go by different titles. So you might have king or queen. You might have this guy. In China, he was known as the emperor. You might have these people over here. More pictures of kings and queens. But the point is, What makes them a monarch? Well, this right here. Monarchs are chosen to lead by birth. Their power is hereditary. Now, if you're asking what is hereditary, hereditary means inherited. So a lot of times we use it with genetics. Make sure that's correct. A lot of times we use it with genetics. So with genetics, we might say, oh, hey, you have a certain hair color, a certain eye color because you inherited it from your parents. In other words, your eye color or your hair color is hereditary. Well, in this case, you being able to rule is also hereditary, meaning the reason why you're the leader of the country is because your parents were leader of the country before you. That's what gives you the authority. Now, if you think about it, that means that, you could be the brightest person in the country. You might be not so bright. But it doesn't matter. So the people don't elect you. So it doesn't matter because the people don't have a choice. They don't elect you. Since your parents were king or queen before you, now you're king or queen. And once you die, your children will be king or queen. It's all about your power being inherited. Okay? Now, because we're in middle school, we don't just stop with, okay guys, hey, a monarchy, this is what it is. Well, we actually need to go and look and say, okay, well, are there different types of monarchies? And the answer is yes. So we know by now, hopefully, and just a little recap, a monarch. A monarch is a person whose power is inherited from their parents ruling, and we use titles for monarchs like king or queen or emperor. Or a female version of emperor is an empress. If any of you guys have watched Aladdin, which I know a lot of you guys have, you guys remember Jasmine's father, what was he called? The Sultan. Okay, well, there's all sorts of different titles for a king or queen, for a monarch, I should say. But you always know a monarch because, they're chosen to lead by birth. Their power is hereditary. Their power is inherited by their parents. That's what makes them a monarch. But there are two types of monarchies. Let's go through, let's take a look at one of them. Absolute monarchy. Let's make sure we write that down. So absolute monarchy. An absolute monarchy is a type of government in which the monarch has absolute power. What they say is law, and the monarch is above the law. So again, the monarch has absolute power, what they say is law, and the monarch is above the law. So what does that look like? Well, let's take some students in our virtual class, right? So Dina, I talk to Dina a lot. So congratulations, Dina. Welcome to the land of McGee. This is McGee land. All that you see before you. Everything, we look over here, all of this is McGee land. And Dina is queen of McGee land. But see, Dina is not just queen of McGee land. Dina is an absolute monarch. So what does that mean for Dina? Well, that means that whatever Dina says becomes law. Now, that does not mean that literally every word that comes out of her mouth is law. So if Dina says, hi, I like a turkey sandwich doesn't become law. But if Dina says, this is now law, it just becomes law. There's no Congress that votes on it. There's no court system that I can sue to have that law overturned. Once she says that something's a law, then it's a law. So Dina says, no, all people named Corey must live in Antarctica. Actually, no, that's bad. That's bad now. Just try something like this. All right, all people whose name is Corey must be sentenced to life in prison because their name is Corey. Well, it just is. So it doesn't matter how unfair that is. Once she said that that is the law, that all people named Corey must be in prison for life because their name is Corey, well, now it's a law. Because she has absolute power. Not only does, Dina, how could you do that? How could you do that to poor Corey, Dina? No, I'm just playing. All right, so the monarch is also above the law. So that means that just because the law is in place, the monarch doesn't have to follow it. So Dina may say, hey, there is no stealing in McGee land. Okay, well, that doesn't matter. She's allowed, she can steal because she is the monarch. she doesn't have to follow her own laws because she's the highest power in the land. So there's no one who can arrest her. There's no one who can put her on trial. Dina is it as an absolute monarch. So I hope that makes sense. I'll say, sorry, Corey. I was about to say life imprisonment. It's not that great. What can I say? All right. But that would be an example of an absolute monarch. Whatever she says, it doesn't matter if it's unfair. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. Once she says it's a law, it now becomes a law. And I hope you guys can think for a second, what would be the problem if that were the case? If you're the citizen, if you're the subject, and you're not even the citizen, if you're just the subject of that country, you're just hoping and praying that the monarch's good, because there's nothing you can do to get rid of that monarch. You can't vote them in. Their power's inherited by their birth. It's hereditary. You just have to hope that they have some decent morals. So those are some problems that can arise with an absolute monarch. And so we have some examples. King Louis from France. I believe this is King Louis the 16th, if I remember correctly. This is Sultan Mehmed II. So these guys were absolute monarchs. Basically, they had no real checks on them, meaning any government, like a Congress or someone that could stop them. Once they said that something was law, it became law. All right, so that's an absolute monarchy. Not that great, not that great a system. All right, you can definitely see some of the flaws that can develop. But there is a different type of monarchy. So a lot of times, now there are still absolute monarchies today, but most absolute monarchies that we think about are hundreds of years in the past, so 300, 400, 500 years. Now again, that doesn't mean that there aren't absolute monarchies today, but there's a lot less of them than there were, say, 400, 500 years ago. Now let's take a look at the second monarchy. This is one that we see a lot today that we would never have seen 500 years ago, or we would only have seen the very beginnings in a very limited form 400, 500 years ago. All right, constitutional monarchy. So let's take a look at this. A constitutional monarchy is a government where the monarch is just a figurehead. Figurehead means they represent the country, but they don't have any power. The real power is with the prime minister. They are also under the law. So in a constitutional monarchy, once you think about it this way, right? Let's take some more students from our virtual class. So I wrote some down because I want to make sure I can remember the names and see them close up. So, I don't know, Marcelo. Congratulations, Marcelo. You are now King of McGee-land. So Marcelo is King of McGee-land, King Marcelo. Now, Marcelo, because he's King of McGee-land, he's got a lot of money, he's pretty famous, but he has no power. King Marcelo is a king, he's a figurehead. He represents the country. He's even a good ambassador for the country, meaning that he'll represent his country in foreign countries. He'll go to other countries as a representative of his country. So he's a great representative, but he has no power. Not only does he not have any power, but King Marcelo is also under the law. So if King Marcelo breaks the law, he can be arrested and put on trial. He is not the ultimate power. The laws of that land, whether it's written in a constitution or however those laws are set up, those laws are the ultimate authority, and not even the king is above the law. Now, if King Marcelo, by the way, isn't in power, then who is? Well, he says the prime minister. So in this case, it's Prime Minister Mike. So Mike, you know who you are. Mike is prime minister. Mike is the person who the people actually elected, or we should say, the people voted for his political party, and so therefore he becomes prime minister. So the real power is with Mike because he has been elected by the people through their choice of his political party. So does that make sense? King Marcelo is king. He's a figurehead. He represents the country, but the real power is with Prime Minister Mike because Mike's party has been elected. A lot of times that's how a prime minister is elected, is through his political party being voted for. So does that make sense? King Marcelo doesn't really have any power. Real power is with the person whom the people elect. That's a constitutional monarchy. So take a look here. Move this a little bit close up. A lot of you guys are used to this person. You guys have probably seen this person in the news. This is Queen Elizabeth II. Queen Elizabeth II is Queen of the United Kingdom. But guess what? She has no real power. She's a very rich woman. She is well loved and respected across the world, but she doesn't have any power. The person who has power is this guy, Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson, his political party won the election. Since he is the leader of the political party, he is therefore Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He's the one with power. So she is just a figurehead. She represents the United Kingdom, but she has no real power, and she is still under the law. The guy who was the guy whose political party was elected, that man is the real power. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. Marcelo, hey, you get lots of money, but you don't have any power. Mike, you're the one who has power, but you have to make sure that people continue to vote for you. All right, make sure that that works. So constitutional monarchy, person's under the law. The prime minister, sorry, I should say the monarch is under the law. Real power is with the prime minister. So I hope that makes sense. That's monarchy, okay? Part 2 will be coming up shortly.